Hello, welcome everybody to the Department of Psychiatry DICE rounds, which is Diversity, Inclusion, Culture, and Equity rounds. We typically grab the fifth Wednesday of any month, but this month we changed our schedule a bit, so we're a little bit earlier than usual. I'm Caroline Nestro, and I'm the Director of the Office of Diversity, Inclusion, Culture, and Equity in the Department of Psychiatry, where I work with Dr. Telva Oliveras, who is our Associate Chair for Diversity and Inclusion. Today's presentation is called The Healer's Village, Creating an Ecosystem of Wellness for People of the African Diaspora, and it will be presented by Melanie Funchess, a very long-time partner of the Department of Psychiatry, and I'll be giving you a full introduction shortly. Just some housekeeping, as we usually do at the beginning of Grand Rounds. All of your mics and cameras are off, just the presenters and the interpreters' cameras are on. The chat box is also just used for us, the presenters and the behind the scenes folks, but the Q&A box is opened, and we really encourage you to put in your comments and questions in the Q&A, and myself and Dr. Telva Oliveras will be reviewing the questions, and we'll pose them to Ms. Funchess at the end of the presentation. There's a couple of ways to give feedback about today's presentation. Toward the end of the presentation, in the chat box, you will see a link. You can click on that link and it'll open the survey that you can complete for the evaluation of today's presentation. Or tomorrow or the following day, you'll get an email with the link for the evaluation as well. And we really encourage you to complete those evals so we get feedback, especially for future presentations that you'd like us to plan. I think that's the housekeeping. So I'd like to introduce you to Melanie. Ms. Melanie Funchess has served as an advocate for children, youth, and families for over 2 decades. She is currently the CEO and principal at Ubuntu Village Works, LLC. It's an organization dedicated to creating culturally responsive, community-driven healing and wellness spaces. She's also the founder of the Healer's Village, a home for culturally responsive healing and wellness for the Black community. Melanie has worked extensively in culturally responsive practice, implicit bias, family engagement, and empowerment. She presents, trains, and consults locally and nationally in cultural competence, community building, community partnership building, racial trauma and healing, and mental health in communities of color. Ms. Funchess has a TEDx talk titled Implicit Bias, How It Affects Us and How We Push Through, that is available for viewing on YouTube. Ms. Funchess also has served and continues to serve on several national and community-based coalitions, initiatives, and organizations, such as the Child, Adolescent, and Family Branch Council for the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, or SAMHSA, the National Network to End Disparities in Behavioral Health Care, African American Leadership Development Program, African American Health Coalition, Black Women's Leadership Forum, Greater Rochester Black Agenda Group, and many others. She also served as Commissioner of Schools for the Rochester City School District. Ms. Funchess is a devoted wife and mother of 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls. Her mission is to use her knowledge of systems and communities to create culturally responsive spaces for healing and opportunities for youth and families to be empowered and successful. She advocates to rebuild the village where every child is our own, where we have front porch neighborhoods and we use language and respect that respects everyone. I will now turn it over to Ms. Funchess. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Caroline. And I just want to say how honored I am to be here and to have this opportunity to share with you all. To share this work. The work of the Healer's Village has been something that has been many years in coming. And in my work, the way I got here, we'll talk about how I got to this work and just really why it's so necessary, but also why it's the vocation for me, you know. So why is it not working? I'm sorry, I am having technical challenges. It worked a minute ago.
Make sure your cursor
There
is, you got
There we
it.
go.
Phew. Okay, so if this had been a live presentation before I began, I would have asked the elders for permission to speak. In all things that we do, all things that I do, I want to honor the elders and the ancestors for all that they have given me, because I am, because they are, and they have been. We don't stand on their shoulders, we stand on their backs, because they have done all the things that need to be done so that we can be who we are. And I hope that all that the work that we do embodies their wildest dreams. So we're going to talk about why, the big things we're going to talk about today is why do we need, why was this necessary, right? And why did I choose to go in this way? You know, we're going to talk about Nichols theory for a moment and say, this is why I'm choosing to do this in this way. And we're going to talk about why this way in contrast to what already exists, right? Because I get a lot of questions like, well, why do you need culturally responsive or culturally specific? And so we're going to talk about that. And we're going to increase, and then we're going to talk about what it is about building an ecosystem. You know, we're going to talk about what that is, what that looks like, and how through Healers Village, we're doing that locally. So when I talk about healing, a lot of times sometimes when we refer to medicine, right? When we refer to physical medicine, we talk about you heal a present day hurt. In psychiatry, which in particular, we can talk about longer term hurts, but many times I don't know if we really understand how far back this hurt goes. So I don't know if we understand how far back this hurt goes. So if we look, we as people of the African diaspora living in the States who came through the transatlantic slave trade, the Ma'afa, have been fighting for full citizenship, to be full citizens for 402 years. And a lot of times when I say that, you know, people are like, it's not been, you know, it's been over, but that's why I break it down in the way that I have, so we can understand that it has not been that long. So from 1619 to 1865 was 246 years of chattel slavery, where people were bought and sold. So and then there was emancipation in 1865, but not really, because from 1865 to 1965, there was Jim Crow segregation, where in the South, people had no rights. And in the North, there were some, and we know about that. So if we think about this, from 1965 to now is 56 years. Now, how many of us are either 56 years or older ourselves? Or our parents are over 56 years? It is not that long ago. So when you think about it in that context, take 56 years out of 402 years, we really need to see that. And when we think about those 56 years, what has happened in those 56 years? We've experienced redlining, where there has been serial divestment and hyper-segregation in communities where Black and brown people live. There are health disparities, and we know those, that the outcomes for Black people are worse across every health domain than their white counterparts. There's educational inequality. Some people call it the achievement gap, but I call it the opportunity gap. And it was never more prevalent than it has been in the last 18 months with COVID. We have concentrated poverty. So with us having concentrated poverty, there's all the things that come with that. And then we have mass incarceration. You know, and I put this up because I always do a plug for 13th. by Ava DuVernay. It's been out a few years. If you haven't seen it, please see it. But it talks about how you go, like I said, it goes from slave to criminal with one amendment. We were free, but not really. And in the context of all that is racialized trauma. If you see the one slide that says say their names, it is an incomplete list. This list only goes as far as George Floyd. But those are the names of people who were killed by state-sanctioned violence. And when I say state-sanctioned violence, I mean they were killed by the police. And there's, I think Ahmaud Arbery is one of the few in there who was not killed by the police, but there were people who were hunted down and killed. So when you're looking at these things, I want you to know, to say, this is why we need specific types of healing, because the healing needs to match the challenge, the trauma. I like to use this quote a lot. They tried to bury us, but they didn't know that we were seeds. The challenge with that is there's a lot of words in our lexicon apart among Black people. We talk about Black girl magic, Black girls rock, and all these things. And because we talk about our resilience, and that resilience is true, but it comes at a cost. And what I think happens is people believe that because we're still standing, that we are okay. And there is in different countries in Africa, there's a thing called Kasering Ingera, how are the children? And it means, because they believe if your children are good, you have a good village, a good city, a good community. If your children are well, your community is well. And the children are not all right. They get up, they walk, they go every day. And yes, we rise through, but there's still things there. A psychiatrist and recent ancestor, Dr. Carl Siebel, who was my man crush every day, may his walk with the ancestors be sweet. He said this, and it touched me, and I've said it everywhere I go. Risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. Again, risk factors are not predictive factors because of protective factors. All of the things I talked about in the last two slides do not necessarily predict the outcomes for members of my community because of the protective factors that we can put in place. And that's what we're going to talk about. An ecosystem is a network of interconnected systems that operate under a shared culture and set of values. The key part here is a shared culture and set of values. When I talk about culture, I'm not just speaking about race and ethnicity, even though, you may hear that this is for people of the African diaspora. That is a wide range of people. It's about how we it's not just saying, well, this is just for Black people because we're Black. There's a set of cultural norms that every country has differences, but there's certain cultural norms that pass through, and there are things that speak to our ancestral memory. And so that is why this is the importance of building an ecosystem. And why I chose the term ecosystem, why I'm trying to build an ecosystem is I've been doing this work for over 2 decades, like I said, and I've done many programs. And what I saw was that people can come into the program and they could learn skills, they could do stuff, but they couldn't maintain for so long after they left the program or the initiative or whatever it was. And what I came to realize is it's people in these parents' families are like seedlings. When you start a garden, like the seedlings here, and you have them in the these little pots, right? I'm gonna go back. When you have them in these little planters, you can control the soil, the air, the water, the temperature, everything about it. So you can grow it. And you can control how well it grows. And you can do little modifications to make sure it can be good and strong. But eventually, you need to plant that seed into the ground, that seedling into the ground. And then you are dependent on the ground that it's planted in to be fertile, to have nutrients to feed. But what happens is sometimes the ground is poisoned, the soil is poisoned. We live here in Rochester, and I can't plant in my backyard because I live in a city house because of the amount of lead that exists in the soil. So the soil is poisoned. So I have to do my gardening out of raised beds, right? So what I feel is this is a metaphor for our children, youth, and families. They are like the seedlings, and the soil, which is the general systems culture of Rochester, is poisoned because it's not designed for them. The work of the Healer's Village sits under two sets of values, the Nguzo Saba and the principles of Ma'at. Now, I typically do not read the Nguzo Saba, but because I know that we may be a mixed audience, so I am going to take the time to read them so people can understand. There's Umoja, unity, to strive for and maintain unity in the family, community, nation, and race. Kujijakalia, self-determination, to define ourselves, name ourselves, create for ourselves, and speak for ourselves. Ujima, collective work and responsibility, to build and maintain our community, our community together, and to make our brothers' problems and sisters' problems our problems and solve them together. Ujama, cooperative economic, to build and maintain our own stores, shops, and other businesses, and to profit from them together. Nia, purpose, to make as our collective vocation the building and developing of our community in order to restore our people to their traditional greatness. Kuumba, creativity, to always do as much as we can in the way that we can in order to leave our community more beautiful than when we inherited it. Imani, faith, to believe with all our hearts and our parents, our teachers, our leaders, our people, and the righteousness and victory of our struggle. When people hear the Nguzo Saba, typically they think about Kwanzaa, right? Kwanzaa is a celebration period that happens between December 26th and January 1st, and that week between Christmas and New Year's. And each night people will celebrate one of the principles, and you will light a kinara, but the principles are meant to be lived all year round. There, Dr. Malana Karenga, who developed the Nguzo Saba and developed Kwanzaa as a connection point for people of that diaspora living here in America to connect them back. He set these principles out as a guidepost for how we can be in our true collective selves. I'm not going to read these out. My slides will be available, but the second foundational set of principles are the principles of Ma'at. The principles of Ma'at are principles that came out of ancient Kemet, which you know as Egypt. And they are a set of principles. They are truth, justice, harmony, balance, order, reciprocity, and propriety. The principles say that they're all based in the belief that we are interconnected. And in our interconnectedness, we live in this interconnected, this sense of something called Ubuntu. Ubuntu means I am what I am because of who we all are. It talks about that interdependence. In Ubuntu, I cannot be well if you are sick. I cannot be free if you are bound. I cannot truly be full and well and healthy if you are hungry. It means that my liberation, my health, my wellness, my freedom is intrinsically bound up with yours. So I need to see how I can be and what I can do and what I can be to make sure that you are well as me, because I cannot be fully well, fully actualized, fully anything without you. This is based a lot of the reason I chose to operate in this very specific way was based on some of the work of Dr. Edwin Nichols. And Dr. Edwin Nichols developed the philosophical aspects of cultural difference. Under the philosophical aspects of cultural difference, he looked at concepts of groups of people. And for the purposes of this talk, I will focus my conversation around Africans, African Americans, Latinos, and Arab people, and their axiology. Axiology is the study of value. It is the thing that holds the highest value. The value for people of the African diaspora is member to member. The highest value is in the relationship between people. The way this manifests itself, and when I talk in community about this, this is how, if you ever go to a cookout, a Black cookout, you can walk, or a family reunion, you'll walk in and one of the old elders may say to you, "Who's your mama?" What the question that they're actually asking you is, how am I connected to you? What is my relationship to you? And so at my family reunion, when this would happen to me, inevitably I would say, "I'm Yvonne's baby girl, I'm Bubba's niece," depending on who it was. And then once I said that, they understood what the connection was. And the social capital that my mother or my uncle held was passed on to me. That meant that I was one, that they looked out for me. They made sure I got a good plate. They made sure I was part of the games. They made sure that the other cousins came around and they took care of me because they knew what the relationship was. And so in that relational axiology, that is the foundation for everything we do. Everything we do through Healers Village is based in a relational model. And also in Nichols' theory, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time here, but it talks about how our ways of knowing. And it's like we know through symbolic imagery and rhythm. We do holistic thinking. So wherein we don't think, we think holistically and cyclically instead of linearly. So, and we also think, use a diurnal approach, which means it's the two seemingly opposite things can be true at the same time. The example is this woman who has a crack addiction is a good mother. These are two things that people do not necessarily link together. But then if you look in a very holistic thing, does this woman love her baby? Yes. Does she try to feed and clothe and take care of her baby? Does she rock her baby to sleep? Does she try to sing songs? Yes. Does she also battle a terrible addiction? Yes. These things can be true at the same time. Yet even many times dominant culture will make them mutually exclusive. And so, and because we understand the concept, understanding the concept of village, we can use these ways of thinking to create a different way of engaging, a different road to healing. So in creating this different road, we want to see what are we comparing it against, right? And so when we look at traditional mental health treatment, a lot of it is office-based. People have to come to you, or it's web-based now because of COVID, right? But you're going to the place. Our healings are community-based. Models based on dominant culture norms. And when I mean that, I mean white, right? Eurocentric cultural norms. That means it's based in individualism. It's based in all the definitions of how treatment is provided, how people are seeing the world, how people are assessed is based in this norm. Models in the Healers Village specifically, but in many BIPOC healing practices, it's based on, born out of authentic cultural wisdom and practices. What we know that works. There's things that we know that work, things that have been handed down to us from our ancestors and from our elders. Traditional mental health treatment is based in the individual, right? You go to one-on-one psychotherapy, or a lot of it's about you and your individual. Ours is, again, based in Ubuntu. It's based in a collective. Because we understand, when we understand this interdependence, we understand that in order for me to be well, you need to talk to my husband. My husband needs to be part of my wellness. You need to talk to my kids. You need to talk to my sister. And then you need to talk to people who I know are as family, but may not be considered family in the dominant culture's construct. Providers of these services are often not from the same community as the people they serve. In these practices, the participants and leaders come straight out of the community, and they're members of the same community. Because the goal of this, and the goal of Healers Village, is for people to become the owners of the tools of their own healing. This is not to say that this supplants traditional mental health treatment when it's necessary, but there is such a much wider net of things that are healing. The saying I've always said is, there are many things that are therapeutic that are not necessarily therapy. So this is, and when we're working in this way, we look at the whole expanse of things that are healing and are able to be healing for people. So, and then the model for mental health is called mental health treatment, which means it's based in treatment. The model of our work is based in healing. Now, people say, well, Melanie, is that realistic? Some people will have a chronic condition, but if your heart is healed and you can manage your health, it's about giving people the opportunity to thrive, to be their best selves. This and traditional mental health work is what we call head work, right? We work with, people's thoughts and stuff. Also, but in these traditional healing practices, we do what I call heart work. We talk about the way we think, but we do mind, body, soul, spirit. But we come from here because it's a belief that becomes a thought, that becomes an idea, that becomes an action. So we start at the root, and the root is at the heart. Now, while Healers Village is something new in Rochester, these concepts are not new. These practices have been in our community since the beginning of time. And what is happening through these things, it's a recalling of our ancestral memory. When I explain this in community, the way I talk about it is, do you ever know someone who inherently knew how to do something, but nobody taught them? When growing up in New York City, there were Black girls who always knew how to braid hair. And I say, who taught you that? And they said, I don't know, I just always knew how. It is out of their ancestral memory. Or if you know families where everybody can sing. And for generations, this has been a family of singers. Like in gospel music, the Winans family is a family of singers. Even the dog can sing, I think, right? But this is something that's been passed down to them generation after generation. It's part of their ancestral memory. And in these practices, it's about affirming this ancestral knowledge. Because when we were brought here, and in a lot of these systems, the things that we know inherently that are indigenous to us were called things that were bad. You know, Africa was a dark continent. They talk about our traditional medicine and our traditional religions as hoodoo, voodoo, and black magic, right? But there's some healing things. You know, I remember my aunt could tell my cousins when they would go down south, she would be here in Rochester. And when my cousins or people go down to Georgia, she would tell them, go out of Mama Lena's back door, take 10 paces straight ahead, turn 90 degrees right, take 5 paces. When you look down, there's going to be a leaf that looks like this. Do not pull it out the ground, but cut it and bring me cuttings, put it in a bag, wrap it up in paper towel, put it in a bag and bring it back to me. Now, did we know what the leaf was? No. But did we listen? And when we followed her directions, was that leaf there in that big yard? Yes. Did we cut it? We brought it home and she made medicine. She may make salves and poultices and teas and things. And these are things that healed us. But as time has gone on, we look to big pharma and have supplanted what we've known indigenously, historically, for big pharma. And we understand that not everything is cookie cutter, right? In the traditional systems, we have a continuum of care. We have outpatient services. We have day treatment. We have partial hospitalization. We have hospitalization. We have RTCs and RTS. We have these very set things. But in traditional things, we have different approaches for different times and different situations. But they all share some common threads. Like we share that, like the axiology that I talked about from Nichols and the principles of Ma'at and the Nguzo Saba. And what the biggest thing is that community can do this for itself if it's provided the right tools and support. The goal of Healers Village is to do that. Now, the components of this ecosystem are on 3 levels: the policy level, the program level, and the practice level. On the policy level, it's about creating changes to policy governing the care and support of people of the African diaspora. And I will get into the details of this and what this looks like. And because there are policies in place, both big P and little p policies, like literally state policy and like program policies within programs or policies within institutions that are creating barriers to people of the African diaspora getting culturally responsive care. So we want to address the policies. On the program level, we want to increase the capacity for creating anti-racist culturally responsive services, right? And culturally specific services. We want to change our organizational cultures, both inward facing and outward, so that we are able to serve people better. And when I say inwardly facing and outwardly facing, what I mean by that is we change the culture so that the people of the African diaspora who are working in those situations feel affirmed, which gets to our new thing about creating things about recruitment and retention. And that because what we know is as a man thinketh, so is he. Same as an institution. As an institution is out inside, that leaks to who they are outside. And so we want to fix the culture, change the culture within the institutions and how the institutions react with each other so that it can come out. On the practice level, we want to create culturally responsive healing spaces. And we do this, there's a concept I talk about remembering, re-membering, which means bringing you back into membership with. This is a concept that I learned from a Seneca Bear Clan sister of mine. And when the different Native nations, they bring their children, like the children who went to the Indian schools, the children who were adopted out, when they're brought back in, they're remembered to their Indian self and they're remembered to the old, what they call the old. And I think we do the same thing for people of the African diaspora, to their ancestral roots, practices, and reminding them of their greatness. Because in dominant society, the pictures and the messaging that is given does not speak to the greatness. We increase community knowledge and reducing stigma so that as we put these things on, we can reduce and make these conversations natural and what I try to sometimes call fun, easy, and popular. And we provide all the support that's necessary so the community become the owners of the tools of their own healing. What does this look like? On the policy level, we're looking at advocacy around licensure. Right? What we want to specifically see happen, and we'll talk about it in the next slide, is we have the Black Healers Network, which works in this advocacy space to advocacy for policy change to create for culturally responsive spaces. And what that looks like is things like Daniel's Law, things like we want to look at licensure of clinicians and make sure that there is more education required in culturally responsive treatment. That in the CEUs that they have to get every 3 years, that there is a mandate that there's a certain percentage of that has to be in culturally responsive practice. So that we can make sure our workforce is having the level of training and coaching that they need to be well, to be able to provide good services. We are also on the program level, we're bringing in programming and doing training and capacity building to help people to have the internal capacity. And y'all, I have turned off my phone 5 times. It's just, it won't turn off. It's the devil phone. But anyway, we also, part of this, we have been training clinicians, and I'm so happy to say that the University of Rochester Medical Center is a partner in this, that we are currently, between the 2 hospital systems in the community, we are currently training 60 clinicians in 2 different approach and 2 different models. We have a set of non-Black clinicians that are taking anti-racist culturally competent treatment for Black families, and a set of clinicians, Black clinicians, commissions of the African diaspora, who are learning N2, the model that's N2 psychotherapy, which is a culturally specific psychotherapy model. It is the goal of the Healers Village that we are able to take it's 4 cohorts of 15, but take 60 people through at a time for the next several years until all clinicians in our community who want to have or will have this training, so we can increase the capacity of our community around culturally responsive practice. On the practice level, we are bringing a number of things online to help on the practice level, because we know on the ground level, our people are having challenges. So we have emotional emancipation circles, which are circles that are community led. They're layperson led, they're support, and they help address racial trauma specifically. There's circles, all Black rooms that are designed to address racial trauma through remembering and bringing people back into remembrance and helping them to have tools around addressing their trauma. We also have a crisis clinical intervention pool. What this is that there are Black clinicians in the pool, and if there's people who need to see a Black clinician, but for whatever reason, because of the policy reasons that about clinicians being able to be paneled or whatever, they can't get access. There's a financial barrier to them getting access to a Black clinician. These funds are able to help defray some of that cost, to remove the financial barrier to them to be able to get culturally responsive care. And we partner with other organizations like the Black Physicians Network and the Black Agenda Group to forward the local efforts to address health disparities and to address the wellness of Black people. Like I said, on the policy level, we're working on Daniel's Law. Daniel's Law is the law that is coming onto the books to change the way we do mental health response as a result of the murder of Daniel Prude. And we also, like I said before, we're talking about licensure, and we're having a stronger focus on culturally responsive practice. And we also want, from the state level, programs things put in place to targeted work to increase the number of Black clinicians in the workforce. Because right now, depending on whose numbers you read, if you put all of the Black mental health practitioners, that's the psychiatrists, psychologists, nurse practitioners, and master's level therapists, and put us all in a bucket, put everybody in the bucket, it makes up between 3 and 4%. Now, knowing what we spoke about before, about the 402 years, and particularly the 56 years, the level of trauma that our community, and understand our community on average is about 14% of the population. But if you look at trauma, the level of trauma that's experienced by that 14%, the needs far outweigh the capacity. So we really, while we're training, non-Black clinicians to do better service, we also need to add more people of the African diaspora to the workforce. It is what it is. We're also looking at insurance, removing the systemic barriers to culturally responsive care, increasing the number of paneled Black clinicians, removing barriers to Black clinicians being able to be paneled, and being also to get the insurance companies to recognize and pay for indigenous, culturally specific healing and wellness practices. On the program level, we want to spread the values that we talked about previously at home, at school, at play. This is how you make an ecosystem. So that no matter where people go, they are experiencing the same values. So some of the things we're using to do that is preventing long-term anger and aggression in youth. Play is a violence prevention intervention, some people call it, but it's an intervention based in recast theory, which is a racial identity theory that teaches young people through sport to reject Black young people to reject society's rejection of them, and for them to be able to understand their bodies and listen to their bodies, to be able to locate, calculate, and communicate about their levels of stress so it does not progress into anger and potentially violence. Victorious Minds Academy is some of the work of Dr. Joy, and the play is work of Dr. Howard Stevenson out of Penn. Victorious Minds Academy is a local iteration of the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy that is a relational model of educational intervention that speaks to using the theory of around multisystemic therapy in partnership with Nichols theory to do a culturally responsive teaching of how you interface with children of the African diaspora in a relational way, and how that changes outcomes. We did this with the Rochester City School District a few years ago, and we noticed a steep decline in needs for discipline, steep decline in referrals, steep decline in suspensions, and a sharp increase in attendance and parent engagement. Through several things in the district, it went away. So we're seeking to take it back out and do it as a community push-in intervention and bring it back. Afrocentric rites of passage. Rites of passage is a program that young people go through. Think similarly to a bat mitzvah or a bar mitzvah. It's where you come in, you learn about yourself, you learn about your people. This is when you pick up your Adinkra symbol and you go through a series to bring you into the phase, out of the child rite and into the rite of adulthood. We're also increasing the capacity. Like I said, we're training clinicians, we're creating culturally responsive systems. We're incorporating accountability measures for culturally responsive practice, and we want them to be put into performance appraisals. We want to create strategies locally for the recruitment of Black clinicians, and through the Black Healers Network generally, and the Healers Place specifically, we create opportunities for training, coaching, and support of Black clinicians. Because what we've learned over the years is that Black clinicians many times are the only ones in their practice. And because many of them face some of the same challenges that their clients face, they hear this double whammy. So the example that I talk about with this is, I'm driving to work, I'm stopped by the police, I'm already anxious because I'm being stopped by the police. and I have this interaction with the police. I'm frightened, what have you. I get to work. Now I'm late. So I get to work. I'm running into work. I have to put my bag down to have my first appointment. My first appointment walks in, and their presenting issue today is that they got stopped and harassed by the police. I have to then in turn make sure I stuff mine so I can help them with theirs. But I'm being triggered because I just had this happen. And they're coming to me for help to process it, but I'm having it happen to me. And this is the type of thing that we talk about in these groups, and how do we deal with this in a way that's culturally specific. I've talked about this, about how we're providing resources on a community level, on a practice level. We want to have a database of Black clinicians, and we have the crisis intervention pool. And we said, like I talked about before, the Black Healers Network and the Healers Place. The Black Healers Network is a network of Black people who are practitioners of the healing arts. So it is not just like we have psychiatrists, psychologists, psych nurse practitioners. We have nurses, not necessarily psych nurses, but we have nurses. We have spiritual healers. We have any Black person who believes in a traditional way of being, who practices in the healing arts, can be part of the Black Healers Network, and of a subgroup of that's called the Healers Place. The Healers Place is someplace specifically for mental health clinicians to come and get training, support. We have people who get connections for group supervision, all kinds of things through that particular model. And the purpose of that model is to have a space for Black clinicians to be able to come and just be people, and be able to be able to hear and be in space and in a communal way to address the things that are going on. Sankofa means go back and get it. It's a concept. This is my adinkra. When I talked about rites of passage, this is my adinkra, and it means to take from the past what is good and bring it into the present to make progress for the future. What we have to do, we have to know where we've been to know that where we're going. And being able to know that it's okay to go back to the past and fetch that which is good, because there is good stuff there. Despite what we're being told, despite what you're taught, there's good stuff, and bring it into the present so that it can help us move forward. I just want to say thank you for your time. And if there are any questions, I'll take questions. And I just want to just say thank you so much for this opportunity to share this work with you. This is my life work and the work that's so close to my heart.
Thank you so much, Melanie. Oh my goodness, so much information. And there are some questions that I would like to pose to you. Okay. The first is, people are asking, how can we get more involved in the Healers Village?
So so you know, when you see all this stuff, I launched Healers Village in January of this year. Everything that you've seen has happened in the last 11 months. So what I'm going to do starting next year, I'm going to be putting out more opportunities. Caroline is an incredible partner. So if you want to get in for training in RCAT, anti-racist, culturally competent treatment of Black families, or N2, if you want to be able to help people connect people to the Black Healers Network, if you want to learn more about emotional emancipation circles, all that information is coming up. And I did this work in I did not do this work I did not come into this in a traditional fashion. I was, so I don't have my website up yet. There's not a website up for this yet, because to be very honest, I was approached by funders and they said, like, this Rome is on fire. Melanie, we need you to bring these things. We know you can do this. We're going to give you the funding. Just go work. So I literally jumped in and started working. So now that things are moving, I'm able to go back and do some of those foundational pieces that need to be done. So just keep your eyes open in the new year, and there's going to be lots of opportunities to come in for learning, to come and help, and learn stuff and be part. So I just keep your eyes open.
And Melanie did talk about the training, the N2 RCAT training, which is anti-racist, culturally competent training for clinicians. And we do have 20 clinicians from our department involved. We have 10 non-Black clinicians and 10 Black African-American clinicians involved. And they are feeling like this is one of the best things that they've done. And they are so happy to be a part of this training. Both groups are really having their eyes open. They're saying it's life-changing. So Melanie, we do have more questions about how people can sign up. Is there a wait list for residents or trainees? So there are many people asking about
the
that.
N2 RCAT?
Yes.
All right. So for the N2 RCAT, Caroline is our contact for URMC. And Sarah Hopkins is our contact at Rochester Regional. So if you can get in contact with either of them and make sure that they know that you're interested, what we're going to do, this cohort that's running now has been going since September, and I have a dog, and this is that type of day. Hush. I have a dog, and he's a little tiny dog. Anyway, let them know this cohort that started in September will be ending at the end of January. And we're looking to start up another one probably late February, early March, to give the trainers a little bit of a breather before we start again. What we're going to seek to do is get on schedule within the next year to get on a true fall spring schedule over the next couple of years. So my goal is to be running these for the next twice a year for the next few years. So if the timing does not work out for this spring, it will be back next September. So don't worry, you'll be able to get in, but just make sure you let Caroline or Sarah know.
Thank you so much. Another question from Dr. Myra Mathis is, how can we help capacity to implement your work? How can we help to build capacity to implement your work?
Something that you particularly, the Black Physicians Network are great partners, and Dr. Mathis is absolutely amazing. I am so sorry. I do not know why my phone will not turn off. But,
you can see how busy Melanie is.
What I would encourage you all to do is to look at young talent. You know, that's something that you all as doctors, as med students, as residents, reach back and let people know that this can be, there's a role here for you, you know, and to talk to folks. And you don't have to go into medicine. You don't have to necessarily be a master's level clinician, but getting people to wanting to come into the work of healing of the village, you know, and to really start, like Dr. Mathis is amazing at being able to speak to community. And yes, I am a member of the Myra Mathis fan club, but I would really, something like educating our community, because one of the things that we're challenged with is the strong amount of stigma that still exists. So reaching back, helping young people to see that this road going into mental health and to behavioral health is a viable option that can do great work, right? And also to help educate our community to reduce the stigma, because it's okay to say you're not okay. But it's that message we not only need the right message, we need the right messengers. So that is something that you can do.
Another question is, what are your thoughts about why there is difficulty with retaining Black and Brown mental health providers in the area?
Because the environments and where they are racially hostile. I'm sorry, those of you who know me know that I have no filter between my brain and my mouth. I have been working for the last 15 plus years. When people come into town, I try to connect to them. It's multiple things. One, Rochester's very insular, right? And there's a cycle to this city, whether you know it or not. If the prime time to move to this city is between March and like May. because what happens is we have festival season, right? Typically a non-COVID time, we would have festival season. So that's when people are out and doing things, you get to meet people. But by this time of the year, people are going into underground. So if you have not made relationships, you're stuck until next spring. And then our institutions as a whole are not good at understanding the unique needs and practices and ways of being of people of the African diaspora. There are racial microaggressions that are rampant. You know, I mean, and this is not just for, and this bleeds out into the community, right? And Caroline knows, I said, you know, there's a thing around Strong that don't go to Strong, they kill people. They're racist, right? I mean, there's this whole narrative going on. I mean, so when people hear this, because it's hard enough to be Black and to be a clinician, but you know, going through medical school, getting through residency, you all know how hard that is by itself. Do it being Black. Put a whole nother layer on that. An example of how this works is that this was not the original date for this Grand Rounds. The original date that this Grand Rounds was supposed to take place, I could not do it because I had to rush my husband back to the hospital because the first time he was in your system, that they ignored his symptoms and sent him home. Despite my advocacy, and y'all see, I know stuff, besides my advocacy, they sent him home and then his condition got worse and I had to take him back. So I couldn't do the Grand Rounds because no one listened. This is why we can't retain people. The next question.
I think that's it for most of the questions. Lots of kudos for you, Melanie. Any last comments you would like to leave us with?
What I want to say is all the things that we talk about, like the things that are keeping us from retaining people, all these things are learned behavior. Anything that's learned can be unlearned. It is just about, it's about a statement of will. The way we move is a manifestation of what we believe. If we believe that it's important that everyone who comes through our doors has an experience that speaks to who they are, our actions, not just our words, not just a declaration, not just signing on a decree, our actions and our money and our budgets must reflect that. The last thing I'm going to say about this is there's a quote from James Baldwin. I hear what you say, but I see what you do. Let these things be in alignment so that we can all be well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. This was wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. Please reach out if you have interest in the training. I'm glad to help with that for folks at the URMC.
Hey, Telva.
Telva.
Thank you, everybody, so much.